Episode 248, Worries. An hour later, Haley opened her eyes. She slowly rose, but her legs felt weak. When she remembered what had happened the previous night, she blushed intensely. She remembered making love to her husband, and she felt fulfilled. She was so happy because she knew that it was a first for both of them. It was their night, which would always be special in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Of course, she also remembered just how energetic Brad had been. She hadn't expected him to have such stamina in bed. She knew he had feasted on an assortment of aphrodisiacs before they had gone into their room, but she was still surprised at how passionate he had been. Haley took a shower and then finally stepped out of their room. The butlers were there to welcome her with wide smiles. Haley knew why they were looking so happy. "Miss Haley, do you need anything? Please tell us if we can get you anything. I think you should eat first in order to recover your energy." Mr. Wilson looked like he was the happiest old man on earth right now. Without saying a word, Haley suddenly hugged him. She was so glad that he was just as happy as she was. "I'm fine, Grandpa. Thank you," she said finally. When she heard Tyler's voice, she turned. "Where's Brad?" she asked. "You're looking for your husband?" he asked. And Haley started walking toward him. "Yes." She nodded, and Tyler sidled up next to her. "Your husband is so worried," he said in a hushed voice. "He almost called a doctor to come check on you. He was worried that you hadn't woken up and that you had some bruises." Tyler grinned knowingly. He was afraid that he overdid things. Something bad had happened to you. Haley blushed from her head down to her toes. "What are you saying, Mr. Clark?" she asked shyly. He just stood there, grinning even wider. "Well, I just thought you should know." He coughed to clear his throat. "Anyways, he's in the garden. I think he's trying to calm down, but you better go and check on him before he has a heart attack from stress." Haley looked at him curiously before she hastily walked to the garden. When she saw Brad, she halted. He was watering the plants. No, actually, he was flooding them. He was standing in the garden silently while water poured uncontrollably out of the garden hose. He was still wearing his gray pajamas and hadn't noticed that the butterflies he had scared off all the flowers were now carefully landing on him. He looked so cute that Haley felt a pleasing, warm feeling as she watched him. She wanted to run up to him and give him a tight squeeze. "Miss Haley, he's been like that for more than an hour now. I called for him to come and eat, but he completely ignored me. You better do something before he faints from worry," the butler behind her said, and Haley's eyes widened. "More than 1 hour?" she exclaimed, and he nodded. She hastily walked into the garden and started approaching Brad. She wasn't worried about the plants or all the water. She just wanted to know what was bothering him so much. He was completely lost in thought. Even though he looked adorable like this, she had to get his attention. "Brad," she called out, but her voice didn't seem to reach him. Haley stepped forward and was thinking about surprising him mischievously when he suddenly turned. He was planning on watering the plants behind him, so the water was still gushing out of the hose. As soon as he turned, the water sprayed all over Haley and drenched her. He immediately let go of the hose. He had caused her to get all wet again. Brad was stunned. He leaped toward her and held her face worriedly. "I'm so sorry. Are you all right?" he asked, and Haley chuckled. "I'm fine. I was actually thinking about startling you. Now I'm the one that got startled," she said. He immediately took off his top and gently used it to dry her wet face. When she saw his half-naked body again, she remembered the night they had just shared. She was blushing as he rubbed his shirt on her. He had begun to dry her neck when he suddenly stopped. She looked at him curiously as he suddenly held her and gently bumped his head on her forehead. "Those bruises, do they hurt?" he asked. His eyes were apologetic yet beautiful as ever. She smiled, reached out her hand, and ruffled his hair. "They don't hurt, don't worry. They'll disappear soon," she answered. When he heard her answer, the worry in his eyes disappeared. "I'm sorry. I should have been more tender. Next time, I'll do better," he said. She once again thought back on the previous night. She remembered that he had been ferocious, but had been trying so hard to stay gentle. She blushed again. When she heard him say, "next time," her heart fluttered. Both of them gazed at each other lovingly, and their faces turned scarlet. "Don't worry. I don't mind," she said shyly. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she buried her face into his naked chest. But then he reached for her chin, raised it up, and kissed her. Their kisses were getting deeper and more passionate. They didn't want to stop. It was as though giving themselves to each other, all their reservations had loosened. They didn't suppress themselves anymore. They stopped to take a breath, and they were about to kiss again when a sound stopped them both. Haley bit her lip and touched her stomach as it growled again. "You need to eat," Brad said. He grabbed her hand, and they began to walk back to the house. Episode 249, Refresh. Before entering the living room, Brad suddenly halted and looked at Haley. He had gotten her t-shirt all wet, and it was clinging to her body, accentuating every curve. Brad couldn't stop his eyes from moving to her chest, so before she could notice his stares, he wrapped her up in his pajama top. She just watched him quietly and smiled when her stomach growled again. Worried that she might pass out due to hunger, Brad suddenly picked her up and carried her into the dining room. He put her down, pulled out a chair, and she sat down with a smile. The food had already been served and Haley was eager to eat. But before she could pick up the utensils, Brad grabbed them. "What would you like to eat?" he asked. When she noticed what kind of food had been served to them, her mouth watered. "Everything," she answered. Brad was surprised. He thought she must have been exaggerating because she was hungry. Brad grabbed some food for her and brought it up to her mouth. "Say ah," he said. "I'm fine," she replied with a smile. "I can do it myself. I'm not sick or injured." But Brad didn't move. "I'm the one who made you so tired," he pleaded. "So please, let me do this." Haley couldn't refuse. She opened her mouth as her cheeks blushed because of his kind words. After a while, she was still eating without any sign of stopping. She was hungry, and her husband was feeding her, so she didn't want it to stop. Brad was starting to worry that she might get sick from eating too much. The amount of food he gave her was already a lot more than he'd ever eaten, yet she looked like she was still enjoying her meal. "More?" he asked hesitantly. She nodded her head up and down like a rattle. "Yes, I want more, my darling," she replied as her eyes sparkled. He froze when he heard the word darling. It excited him. Thankfully, he managed to recover fast, and he continued feeding her until she finally said she was full. Looking at the amount of food she had devoured, he almost couldn't believe it. He was secretly planning to ask the butler to prepare some medicine in case her stomach started to ache. "I'm so full," she said with contentment. He looked at her a little worried. "Are you okay?" he asked. She noticed the look in his eyes and chuckled. "Don't worry, I have a big appetite," she replied. She stood energetically. Her exhaustion had finally disappeared. Brad was finally convinced that there was no need for him to worry. Inside the study, Tyler and Ken were looking at the computer screen very seriously. "It's about time," Ken said. "You should tell the boss that we need to leave as soon as possible. We only have 5 hours. Tyler nodded and stood up. He walked over to the window and looked down at the garden. He was thinking hard. The fact that Brad and Haley had finally consummated their relationship drastically changed the current situation. He thought it would be cruel if Brad were to leave right away. He wanted to give them a little more time. Episode 250, Battle Plans. "Let's give them one more night," Tyler said. Ken immediately turned toward him. "How are we supposed to do that?" he asked curiously. Tyler smiled like a devil. "I have a plan," he replied, and Ken's forehead creased. He knew that every time Tyler smiled like that, he was thinking about something extremely daring. "What plan?" Ken asked with a serious tone, and Tyler went silent. He leaned on the window frame for a second and looked intently at Ken. "I'm going to lure them away," Tyler said. Ken stood up. Even though he was expecting something risky, he still couldn't believe what Tyler had just said. It made his eyes widen. "What are you saying? That's too dangerous," Ken exclaimed. Tyler just smiled again. "Did you forget who I am?" he said. Ken knew that Tyler was literally a human weapon, someone almost unbeatable in a fight. Even Ken could not best him. "You know how Brad hates it when you do things like this, Tyler, and you know he'll never let you get away with it," Ken replied, and Tyler's smile faded. "I know. That's why we're going to hide it from him. If he asks, just tell him I went somewhere," he said nonchalantly. Ken wasn't happy about this plan. "Don't make it sound so easy. Brad will notice if you sneak out. And besides, if something happens to you..." Ken sighed. "I don't even want to think about that." Tyler just laughed like it was nothing serious at all. "I told you, don't forget who I am. I'm well aware of the risks. Do you really think someone could injure me?" he said while shaking his head. "Listen, I have the perfect idea." Tyler explained his plan to Ken before stepping out of the room. He saw Brad about to enter the bedroom. "Brad, I have news for you," he said as he approached him. "You still have some time, until tomorrow, actually." Brad looked up at Tyler intently and scrutinized the mischievous grin on his face. He was fully aware of the situation. He knew there was no way for them to stop the agent's raid on the house tonight. If they tried to stop them, it would only confirm that they were there. That's why Brad was already preparing himself to go and explain everything to Haley. "What are you planning to do?" Brad asked suspiciously, and Tyler's shoulders dropped. "Don't tell me you already know what I'm thinking," Tyler mumbled when Brad leaned on the wall. "I won't deny that I want very badly to stay with her a bit longer," Brad said, his eyes filled with sadness. "I would do anything for that. But I won't risk using you to lure them away. Tyler interjected before he could finish. Who said you're using me? I'm just going for a detour. I'll fly to DC and sleep there for a night before flying to our rendezvous. It's practically the same plan. I'll just delay things a bit. Besides, I've been itching for some action for a while now. The war is about to begin, so I need a warm-up, he said as he grinned with intense excitement. Brad was also feeling the rising tension. His eyes turned wild, and he was filled with a fighting spirit as the monster within him started to work its way to the surface. That's right, this war. I'm going to end this war no matter what. Even if the world is against me, I'll bring them all to their knees. No one can stop me, he said with a ferocious voice and a terrifying spirit. He looked as if he was willing to burn the entire world to the ground in order to accomplish his goals. Episode 251, Brothers in Arms. Okay, it's time for me to go, Tyler said, but as he turned to leave, Brad grabbed his shoulder from behind. And who gave you permission to leave? He asked with a threatening look, and Tyler just gazed back at him. Brad continued, and he was about to walk toward his study when Tyler blocked his path. If you're planning to send them false information, that will only delay them for a few hours, and if you do that, they will only become more suspicious. You know I'm right, Brad, Tyler explained, and Brad's gaze turned dark. Then take Ken with you, Brad said. Alan and the others will be enough here with me. Tyler scratched his head. No, Ken should stay here with you. I'll go alone, he said. He lifted his gaze, and his eyes were wild and dangerous, challenging Brad with a stubborn determination. You know this is the best plan if we want to confuse them, not just for now, but in the longer term. They will shift their attention towards Washington, D.C. if they see me there. If that happens, you'll have more time to investigate freely once we reach Laskamar. As far as they are aware, we have always been together all these years, and it's true. We've barely been apart, so they'll never suspect you weren't with me. They know I am always beside you like your shadow. We can trick them. I know you've been considering this for a long time now. Don't worry. What happened before will never happen again, Tyler continued, his voice still firm and unwavering. He knew why Brad was hesitant to let him go. 9 years ago, when they had been cornered by the enemy, Tyler had considered sacrificing himself to save Brad, but Brad had refused even to contemplate what Tyler had proposed. But the situation had appeared hopeless, so Tyler had chained Brad up while he had gone to try to lure the enemy away from where he had left Brad. He still remembered what Brad had said when he returned, drenched in blood after half a day, and he smiled at the memory. Tyler, if you do this again, I will kill you. The words he had heard from Brad had surprised him back then. He had just been a teenager who had only been doing whatever had been in his power to protect Brad. He had believed that the only reason for his existence had been to protect his friend and nothing more. He had wondered whether it had been maybe how he had been created that had made him think and act in this way. He hadn't once considered his own safety, which was why he hadn't understood why Brad had gotten so angry. That same day, Brad had spoken to him while he had treated his wounds. He had spoken to him like a wise old man, and Tyler had not forgotten what he had said. Remember this. I don't need someone who will sacrifice their life for me. If you want to protect me, Tyler, protect yourself first. If you can't do that, then I don't need you. Since then, Tyler had remained at Brad's side. He had sometimes left for a short while if he was required to attend to a dangerous mission. But Brad had always said those same words before he had left. If something happens to you, Tyler, I will kill you. Hearing these words had always made him take extra care. The young Tyler had still been learning how to become a normal human being, but knowing that Brad had wanted him to care for himself had been enough for him. After all, he had been raised by Brad's mother to be a kind and loyal brother to him. Reminiscing about those dark, yet unforgettable times, Tyler could only grin. Don't worry, Brad. I'll be extra careful as usual. There's no way I would let anything unfortunate happen to me. And most importantly, I don't want you to kill me, he said, and Brad's grip on his shoulder loosened before he slowly lowered his hand. Episode 252, Tyler's Mission. Just as Brad and Tyler had finished their serious discussion, Haley stepped out of the room behind them. As soon as he saw her, Tyler leapt toward her and whispered something in her ear. Brad was confused and concerned, and his face turned dark as he watched them speak in hushed tones to each other. He was extremely curious about what they were talking about and what they didn't want him to hear. Unable to take it anymore, he walked over to them when Haley suddenly left to run downstairs, leaving Brad even more confused and glaring at Tyler coldly. What did you say to her this time? He asked, and Tyler shifted his gaze toward the stairs. Nothing important, he replied dismissively, but Brad didn't believe him. He narrowed his eyes and was about to question him further when he heard footsteps coming from the stairs. Haley had hurried back upstairs and was hiding something behind her back as she approached them. Even more curious now, Brad looked at her and she smiled brightly. She moved closer to him and asked, "Give me your hand, Brad," and Brad complied. Haley clasped his hand with hers and Brad was about to ask when suddenly there was the sound of a loud click. When Brad looked down, he saw it had been the sound of a handcuff closing around his wrist. He looked in stunned silence from his cuffed hand to his wife's face. She was still smiling broadly. Tyler was standing behind him, and he felt him pat his shoulder before moving around to stand beside his wife. "Mr. Clark, is this right?" she asked, and Tyler nodded and grinned. Yeah, you did a great job, Miss Haley. This is for his safety," he said as he took the other end of the cuff from her. "Lift your hand, Miss Haley," he continued, and Haley curiously looked at him. "What?" she uttered, but Tyler had already held her hand and click. This time it was the sound of the closing cuff that made Haley blink in astonishment as she looked at her cuffed hand and then at Tyler. Tyler then smiled mischievously as he started to back away from them. "The old man took the key and he'll be back here to uncuff you both tomorrow," he said with a mischievous smile, and the couple's eyes widened. "I have to run. Bye," he said before he disappeared from sight. A few hours later, Tyler was in Washington, D.C., enjoying the chase. He had allowed himself to be discovered on purpose, lurking around the city until he knew that the agents had been on to him. His eyes had been burning with excitement as, time after time, he had allowed himself to be found and then fooled them, giving them the slip so that they had lost sight of him over and over again. It was a game of cat and mouse. He had let them pick up his scent and then vanished right in front of them. Eventually, when he had believed it to be safe, Tyler had entered a discreet underground bar. It had been the agreed site for the rendezvous he had planned and where he had arranged to meet Brad's men in the city. Once inside, he looked around, and when he recognized the secret signal, he walked straight toward a table in a dark corner. He sat down with 3 men, and they exchanged greetings. "Mr. Clark, you have successfully fooled them. They are all heading toward the port now," reported one of the men. Tyler then provided them with their instructions, and they all stood to leave. Just before they reached the exit, someone bumped into Tyler, and one of the men grabbed the woman who had collided with him. Tyler continued toward the door, paying no heed to the incident when he heard a voice he would know anywhere and couldn't possibly ignore. "You? Let go of me, damn it," she yelled, and when Tyler turned his head toward her, his eyes widened. Episode 253, A Familiar Voice. "What the hell is she doing here?" Tyler asked himself as he looked at the woman in front of him in utter disbelief. "I said let go of me," she yelled as she struggled, and then Tyler finally spoke. "Let her go," he said, and the men immediately complied. Tyler was wearing a plain black baseball cap that shielded his face, but his familiar voice was enough to make the woman sit up and take notice. She swung around to look at him. She hesitantly moved toward the tall man, dressed entirely in black, as if he was a secret agent in a spy movie, lurking in the shadows. She tilted her head to one side as she tried to get a better look at his face, but he suddenly turned and walked away without another word. As Tyler headed toward the exit, he wondered what on earth she was doing in a place like this. And at a time like this, while he was in the middle of a dangerous meeting, he wondered whether, if there were a God, he had a sense of humor and was playing tricks on him by conspiring that he meet her in every unexpected situation, no matter how bizarre. As much as Tyler wanted to ask her why she was here, he knew he had no choice but to take a deep breath, act as if he didn't know her, and leave. Anything else would only put her in danger, which was the last thing he wanted to do. She remained rooted to the spot as she watched him leave. He gave her one small backward glance as he walked toward the door and disappeared. His brow creased in worry as he left the bar. In the split second that he had looked toward her, he had glimpsed that she wasn't her usual self. She was impeccably dressed as always, as if she had come from a special event or occasion, and she looked every inch the sophisticated rich woman she was, but she had a lost look on her face and didn't exude her usual wild and wayward aura. Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted to go back and ask her what was wrong, because he was convinced that something was very wrong. Apart from Brad, he had never felt this desire to help someone before. Usually, he could ignore anyone without batting an eyelid. Furthermore, he was usually particularly focused when he was on an important mission, so this unfamiliar reaction was completely out of character, and he felt disoriented. He was caught between curiosity and wonder. But in the end, he didn't stop or go back. He went straight to a waiting car, and the moment he climbed inside, one of the 3 men spoke. "Mr. Clark, your plan is a success. The enemy has completely lost track of you. They're currently headed toward the pier right now," he said. Tyler looked across at him with an expression that said he wasn't surprised in the least. Of course it was a success. There's no way my plan could go wrong, he thought. "Mr. Clark, shall we go?" the man asked when suddenly Tyler's phone vibrated. He immediately opened the message Ken had sent him, and he could only sigh. Everything is fine here. The boss has asked me to monitor you. Tyler quickly sent a response. Tell him I'm still alive and kicking. Tell him to just make sure he makes a baby tonight. He then signaled to the driver to start the car as he turned his head and looked back at the bar. But just as the car began to pull away, it screeched to a halt. Tyler, who was sitting in the back seat, looked through the front window when the driver cursed. That woman, what is she doing? The driver hissed, and Tyler's eyes widened as he watched a woman absent-mindedly walk in front of the car. Don't mind her, let's go, said one of the three men, but Tyler spoke before the driver had a chance to move off. Wait here, he said, and then he stepped out of the car. Episode 254, A Safe Haven. Amy was humming as she walked. She'd had a little too much to drink, but her mind was still clear. It was just that her eyes were heavy and tired, maybe as a result of her lack of sleep over the last few nights now. She hadn't even noticed that she had walked straight out into the road and into the path of a moving car. She'd been trying to decide where she should go when suddenly a hand had grabbed hold of her wrist and had pulled her back onto the sidewalk, and she had felt like she was instantly awakened from her dizziness by the sudden and abrupt movement. She immediately looked up at the man holding her by the hand, and she was about to protest when she noticed he was the same man she had bumped into earlier. Her eyes widened. Lost for words, Amy tilted her head again to look at his face. When she heard his voice in the bar, she thought she had recognized him, but she had been reluctant to acknowledge him when he had ignored her. However, now that he was holding her hand, his familiar presence didn't escape her. Mr. Handsome? She asked, since she still couldn't see his face because of the shadow cast by his cap. The man suddenly flicked her forehead and she came to her senses immediately. That gesture only confirmed that it was definitely him. Only two men dared flick her forehead like that. So it was either Mr. Ordinary or Mr. Handsome, and it was quite obvious to her who it was this time. How could you flick a beautiful lady's forehead so hard? She yelled at him, but he just dragged her toward the car and threw her inside. Then he climbed in after her, pulled the door closed, signaled to the driver, and the vehicle immediately pulled away. Tyler turned to her, and the man raised his cap to look at his face. Oh, so it is Mr. Handsome and not Mr. Ordinary, she said, and as she spoke, Tyler could smell the combined scents of mint and alcohol. You're drunk, he admonished, and yet you're roaming around alone like a lost puppy in the middle of the night. What do you mean the middle of the night? It's not even dinner time yet, she retorted, and I just drank a little bit. Tyler just flicked her forehead again. Ouch, she complained. What the hell were you doing in here? And in a place like that? He asked. Amy rubbed her head and looked at him with narrowed eyes. Me? What about you? What is rich Mr. Handsome doing in a place like that? She threw the question back at him rather than providing an answer. Tyler was about to flick her again when Haley suddenly moved, and out of nowhere, she bit his earlobe. Hey, what do you think you're doing? He cried. He didn't know what else to say. Then he looked into her eyes and saw that her usual playful look had returned. At the same time, Tyler started to feel mischievous himself. That's what you get for not being gentle, she said, but Tyler suddenly turned around and pinned her down by the shoulders. Look here, little Miss Inappropriate. Are you really trying to provoke me even though I have my men watching? He asked, and Amy went quiet. I'm not trying to provoke you. I'm just taking revenge, she replied in a small voice. Revenge? You call this revenge? Tyler then asked, noticing her quiet reply, and he looked at her with a taunting gaze. What can I do? She asked. I'm not as strong as some other women. I wouldn't have the strength to thump you. She spoke in a louder voice, but her words lacked their usual wit and humor. Why? Are you afraid of me or something now? Do I really look like a macho fighter in your eyes? He asked. Well, she stuttered, and watching her floundering for a clever reply, Tyler knew something was wrong. This woman can always think of a smart remark at a time like this. I've never known her to be lost for words. This is very odd, he thought. What's wrong? Are you finally becoming a good girl now? He asked again, and Amy just creased her forehead. Will we no longer see little Miss Inappropriate now? He continued asking without giving her the chance to answer. Amy was starting to feel dizzy again. Although she could hear what he was saying loud and clear, it was definitely annoying, so she couldn't respond as quickly as she normally did. But ever since that last glass of wine in the wine bar, she'd been fighting the urge to sleep, and the effort had made her dizzy. I wonder whether someone put a sleeping pill or something like that in my drink, she thought, and she was disoriented, because she knew that she couldn't just fall asleep anywhere without someone she trusted watching over her. So she had quickly left the bar, but now that this man was in front of her, she felt she could finally relax. All she wanted to do was close her eyes, but he just continued to tease her. Oh, little Miss Inappropriate is a good girl now. Can't say I'm complaining, though. Tyler began, but he was interrupted when Amy grabbed him around the neck and kissed him as though telling him to shut up. He could taste the mint and wine on her tongue, and he also felt enraptured by her warm kiss. But just as he was about to return her kisses, she suddenly stopped, and her hands that had been wrapped around his neck fell to her sides. When Tyler sat back and looked at her, he was astounded that she was asleep. He couldn't believe that she had fallen asleep so instantaneously. Her eyes were closed, her mouth slightly open, and she breathed quietly and steadily while Tyler remained still, afraid to move. This woman, did she just kiss me so that she could sleep on me? He thought as he watched her sleeping soundly. Episode 255, Awkward Moments. Back at Gray Mansion, Brad and Haley spent the day happily handcuffed to each other. Haley had encouraged Brad to experience many things he had never done before in his entire life. They'd spent time outside in the garden, planting flowers together. She had taught him how to cook her favorite recipe, and then they had washed the dishes together. They had spent time playing video games. To begin with, Brad had experienced some difficulty with many of the tasks, partly because he was a complete novice, but also because the couple had been handcuffed together. Going about your daily routine attached to another person wasn't particularly convenient. It made everyday life a little difficult and required constant cooperation. But Haley had acted as a wonderful guide, leading him through these new and unfamiliar activities. They had coordinated well together, and as a result of their teamwork, they had produced some great results. To anyone observing from a distance, they had been behaving exactly like any newlywed couple, inseparable, synchronized, and enveloped in nothing but pure love. Darkness fell on the day, and Brad and Haley were quietly cuddling on the couch, resting after the day's activities, when Haley pulled away from Brad suddenly. She looked at him shyly as she bit her lip. Noticing the change in her expression, Brad asked, "What's wrong?" Haley shifted her gaze to the vase on the table before she buried her face in the crook of his neck. "I'm so embarrassed, but I need to pee," she blurted out eventually. Brad held her by the shoulders and said, "Okay, let's go." He immediately moved to stand, and Haley was surprised because he didn't seem to give it a second thought. They had reached the bathroom in no time and were both now standing near the toilet bowl. Haley's face was flushing scarlet as she stared at Brad, whose brows were knitted into a frown as he watched her rooted to the spot, motionless. "What's wrong? Do you need help? If you need to go, you should go. It's not good to hold it in," he said gently with a worried expression. But on hearing this, Haley's face flushed even more. She couldn't understand why Brad didn't find the situation uncomfortable. No, I don't need help. I just want you to turn your back, and please don't look at me," she said, and he looked at her in confusion, which made her even more flustered. Why does he not understand how embarrassing this is? She wondered. "Okay," he said before he complied and turned to face the other way. Unable to hold it in anymore, she finally put her hands on her waist. Thankfully, she was wearing comfy shorts that could easily be pulled down. But she had forgotten that she was cuffed to her husband, and the moment she started pulling her shorts and panties down, and as she bent her knees, she also pulled Brad over. Without thinking, Haley pulled her panties up in a blink of an eye. Brad didn't notice her quick move, but he noticed her shorts were already around her ankles and saw her panties. When he blushed a little, unlike Haley, there was no real embarrassment on his face. "Didn't I tell you not to look?" She stammered loudly, and Brad looked a little stunned. He looked at her with a completely oblivious expression, but when he saw how red her face was, he finally realized that she was just embarrassed. He put his uncuffed hand on the back of his neck, and then he said, "But I already saw you last night." And Haley felt like her face was going to burst into flames. She would never have imagined that her previously innocent husband would say words like these to her one day. You really are so shameless now, Brad," she replied loudly as she covered her face. Alarmed by her words, Brad could only apologize. "Okay, I'm sorry. I won't look. I promise," he said quickly, and he turned his face away. Haley just couldn't hold on any longer, pulled down her panties, and finally sat on the toilet bowl. In her head, she was scolding that certain someone who had got them into this embarrassing situation in the first place. "Just wait until I see that Mr. Clark." Episode 256, Shall We Dance? By the time Brad and Haley had finally stepped out of the bathroom, Haley had still been blushing furiously. But the next moment, she saw the signal she had been waiting for from the maids, and the incident was forgotten. She breathed deeply and looked up at Brad, and then without uttering a word, she pulled him by the hand and led him toward the courtyard. When they reached the garden, Brad's eyes widened in surprise. Soft, romantic yellow lights were strung around the courtyard, and white chiffon curtains swayed gently in the light breeze hung around the gazebo in the center. And behind the curtains, inside the gazebo, was a table set for two, complete with candles. Brad realized that Haley had organized a romantic dinner, and he gazed lovingly at his wife. Her eyes sparkled as she said, I can't take you out on a date, but we can still have a romantic date here. What she said tugged at his heart with pain and happiness in equal parts. It was a perfect setting. The lights, the curtains, and the candles all contributed to the romantic atmosphere. Together, they walked along the pathway leading to the gazebo, their wrists still cuffed, holding hands, and hearts fluttering wildly, although neither was quite sure why. That evening in the courtyard under the night sky, they felt like they were the only people on the planet. They were overcome with love and affection for each other, and if anyone had observed the scene, they might have believed that they had happened upon a romantic movie set. Sitting across from each other, they rested their cuffed wrists on the table, still holding hands tightly. Neither of them spoke. They just gazed deeply into each other's eyes as though communicating silently. It was as though they were allowing their feelings and emotions to take over. Then they quietly took turns feeding each other the delicious food on the table. Once they had eaten, they remained at the table drinking wine. Haley took a sip and then stretched her hand underneath the table for a second. When her hand reemerged, it was holding a beautiful purple flower. She reached over to offer the flower to her husband, which he took from her. The purple flower was a viscaria, and Haley explained, "This flower means, will you dance with me?" Brad took her hand, and Haley led him to a space circled with small lights. They stood in the center of the circle when Brad broke the silence. "But I don't know how to dance," he said, his voice full of disappointment. He looked awkward, but Haley found his reaction adorable as she always did. She chuckled softly. "You've never danced before?" she asked, and he shook his head. "No, never. I've never danced before in my life," he replied, and Haley's eyes lit up and sparkled with excitement. "So that means this will be your first? Will I really be your first dance?" she exclaimed. When he mumbled, "Yes." In response, she threw her arms around him and squeezed him hard. "Oh, you don't know how happy I am to be your first dance," she added, delighted, before she let him go. "Don't worry, I'll teach you." Haley then took his right hand and put it around her waist before she laced the fingers of his left hand and her right hand together. Her left hand rested on his shoulder. She then instructed him to look down at their feet while she demonstrated. Afterward, she led her husband in a slow dance. She found he was a quick learner and didn't need to practice much at all. She smiled as she thought, "He's a natural." Their bodies were synchronized in no time at all as they swayed gently and gracefully together to the music. Their eyes were locked onto each other, and the world around them was bathed in a soft, gentle light and the harmony of the music. They just stared at each other for a long while until Haley moved closer to him and buried her face against his chest. "Can you hear my heart beating?" he asked, and she smiled. "Yes, I can. It's loud and fast, just like mine," she answered as she held his hand and put it on her chest. Brad felt the quick rhythm of her heartbeat, and his lips curved into a beautiful smile. Haley looked up in time to see this rare and gorgeous sight. "You're right. Our hearts do seem to be beating abnormally," he said, and Haley gently laughed. Gazing at her sweet and heart-stopping smile, Brad suddenly pulled her closer to him. He held her tight in his embrace as they continued to sway in time to the music. "So, how was your first dance? Did you like it?" she asked softly as she squeezed him, and he kissed the top of her head. "Wonderful. I'm so happy. I feel like my heart is about to explode. I'm glad I never danced with anyone before you came into my life, and I'll never dance with anyone else but you in the future. You're my first and my last," he replied, and Haley felt tears in her eyes. Episode 257, Amy's Game. As he hugged his wife tightly and they both continued swaying slowly along to the music, Brad bent down to whisper softly in her ear. "Haley, I have to leave tomorrow," he said, his voice hoarse and sad, but Haley could also sense a strange intensity in his tone. She pulled away to look at him when, to her surprise, she saw his eyes were brimming with determination and fighting spirit. It wasn't something that Haley had ever seen in him before. She didn't realize it was the same look she had given him the night before when she swore she would never give up on him. "I know. And as I've said, I'll wait for you no matter how long it takes," she said. Brad just held her tightly in his arms once again. "And when I come back, I promise I'll take you wherever you want to go. I'm not hiding anymore. We'll be free to roam just like those couples we saw in the park," he said, and Haley felt tears in her eyes yet again. She couldn't deny that she wished they could go out together, that they had the freedom that other people did. There were many things she wanted them to be able to do together, like normal couples. Just imagining a normal life with Brad made her want to cry. But what had brought tears to her eyes just then was the fact that Brad also now craved a normal life. He now wanted the freedom to do what normal people did. She held on to him tightly again. Now that she knew his story, she could only silently hope and pray every day that he would finally be free. Her heart ached when she thought about all the years he had spent in darkness in a virtual cage. I believe you'll settle everything soon. When you come back, I want to take you to the beach, the market, the mall, and the street. I want to take you everywhere. We'll go wherever you want to go. We could even go to Mount Everest, she said as she chuckled. Then she stood on tiptoe and held his face in her hands. I believe in you, Brad, she said. And then she kissed him. After their romantic date in the courtyard, they returned to the house. Knowing that Brad was leaving tomorrow, Haley didn't want to sleep just yet. She wanted to spend as much time as possible with Brad, watching him and holding him. She led him toward the living room, and they were about to sit together on the couch when Haley suddenly remembered the small box that Amy had given her before she left. She said it was a sweet game for couples and had said that she and Brad should play it together when they were alone at night. Okay, I have an idea. We're going to play a game that my friend gave me, she said, and they went upstairs together to find the box. They sat on the couch near the window while Haley opened the small box Amy had given her. The box was filled with rolled up pieces of paper, and there was a note on top, so Haley took it out. She opened the note, and the words, "Truth or Dare Rules," was written along the top. Haley's forehead creased into a frown when she realized what it was. She had played Truth or Dare once before in high school, and she hadn't enjoyed it very much at all. But as she had already asked Brad to play, she just shrugged. She had no idea that Amy's game would be nothing like the game she had played in high school. It's Truth or Dare. Do you know how to play this game? She asked, and Brad shook his head. You can teach me. I'm sure I'll learn it in no time, he replied. So Haley handed him the note. Rule number 1. Pick one rolled piece of paper from the box and read the question to your partner. If partner chooses truth, he or she will answer the question truthfully. If he or she chooses dare, flip the paper and read to him or her the dare written on the back. Take alternate turns. Rule number 2. You cannot change a dare or truth once selected. Rule number 3. Do not lie when you choose the truth. Rule number 4. No matter how embarrassing the dare is, you have to do it. No excuses. After reading the note, Brad looked at Haley. Any questions? She asked, and he shook his head. Okay then, let's start. Who's first? Let's decide by playing rock, paper, scissors first, and the winner will read first, she continued, and without warning, she raised her hand and swayed it. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot, she said, and on the last word, she held out her fist with an index and middle finger extended. Brad had a look of complete confusion and just raised his hand open flat. So Haley, the obvious expert, won with her scissors against Brad's paper. She chuckled. Scissors cuts paper. I win. She then proceeded to pick a piece of rolled paper from the box and opened it. Okay, here's the question, Brad. What's your partner's most annoying habit? She asked and waited nervously for his response. Truth. None. He replied instantly, and Haley's shoulders dropped. Are you sure I don't have any annoying habits? Owen and Amy tell me I have lots, she asked, and her eyes narrowed slightly. But Brad said, I'm not lying. Nothing you do is annoying at all. Not to me. He spoke solemnly and sincerely, and Haley blushed at his sweet words. Okay then, it's your turn to pick one, she said, handing him the box. He picked another roll of paper, but instead of reading it aloud straight away, he paused for a moment. What's wrong? She asked, but Brad didn't look at her. He cleared his throat before he began to read. What sexual position do you love the most? He asked, and the question was followed by a long silence. Haley didn't react right away, but after a few seconds, she grabbed the piece of paper to check that that was what it actually said. She was shocked to see that it was. Amy, what kind of question is that? She yelled inside her head to her friend as her face started to burn. After a while, she noticed that Brad was quietly waiting for her response, so she uttered the word, dare. He then flipped the paper and once again, he fell silent for a while. Bite your partner's lower lip, he said. Haley, who was still blushing furiously, had no choice but to do the dare. She moved closer to him, leaned over, and bit his lower lip as quickly as possible. My turn, she said immediately after completing her little dare, and she hurriedly selected another piece of paper from the box. If you could change one part of your partner's body, what would it be? If your answer is none, or I don't know, you have to do the dare, she read. He would obviously only respond none to that question, and had no choice but to say, dare. Kiss the favorite part of your partner, she read. She started to turn red, but when she looked at Brad, he looked troubled. But I like every part of you, he said, sounding a little exasperated. Well, just choose one, she suggested. He appeared to give this some serious thought before he moved toward her, and his lips slowly landed on her eyelids. As she felt his warm lips gently pressing against her eyes, Haley felt her heart fluttering like crazy. It was then Brad's turn to read, so he chose a piece of paper. "Describe your first kiss with your partner," he said. Haley fell silent again before opting for a dare, thinking it might be less embarrassing than describing their first kiss. She was wrong. "Take off your partner's shirt using your teeth," Brad stammered as he read the dare, and Haley almost choked. Episode 258, Haley's Striptease. Haley couldn't believe the words on the little piece of paper. She was still burning red with embarrassment, and she had started to cough as well. "Are you all right?" Brad asked with a worried look as he began rubbing her back. But he had already started to imagine her removing his shirt using only her teeth, and he didn't know why, but he thought he would actually like her to do it. However, when he thought about it, he realized that it would just be too difficult, particularly as they were still handcuffed together. "If you can't do it, it's fine. Let's just skip that one. I'll pick another one instead," he said, also afraid that she might even hurt her mouth or damage her teeth by even trying. When she heard his considerate words, Haley celebrated a little inside, but then she remembered the strict rules stating that she had to do the dare, no matter how embarrassing it was. She felt guilty as it seemed that Brad was taking the game so much more seriously. So she made him a promise. "The next one, I promise I'll do it, no matter what it is," she said solemnly, hoping it would make up for the fact that she had already broken one of the game's rules. He then picked another rolled piece of paper and read it to her. "How did you feel during our first night? Provide elaborate details," he asked. His voice softened at the end of the sentence, but she heard it loud and clear. "So that explains why Amy told me to only play this game after our first night together. Amy, you're so despicable. What do you mean by elaborate details?" she yelled inside. Then she looked at Brad, who appeared eager to hear her response, but she felt like her whole body was on fire with embarrassment. She thought about it and struggled to think about what she could say. "I know I could answer the question, but provide elaborate details? I would explode before I could even start," she thought. So she looked over at Brad and thinking about the promise she had just made him, she said, "Dare." He immediately flipped the paper over, but again, he paused for a while and seemed very hesitant. Noticing his reticent expression, her heart raced. However, she knew that it would be unfair if she were to skip another dare, and she had already made him a promise. "It's okay, just read it. I already promised, so I'll do whatever it is," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Strip in front of your partner. Perform a striptease. Note that the partner shouldn't touch the one stripping throughout the entire process." He read so quickly that all the words ran together. As the words sunk in, Haley, who had presented a confident and fighting spirit a moment ago, froze in place. She almost couldn't believe what she had heard. She was speechless. She looked at Brad and noticed his ears were turning red. "It's okay if you can't do it," he said again when he noticed that his wife was shocked, even though deep inside, he really wanted her to do it. And for some reason, the extra part in the note saying that he couldn't touch her somehow made him feel something else that he couldn't explain. Upon hearing Brad's words, she snapped and she bit her lip in determination. She took a deep breath and began to encourage herself. "I can do this. A promise is a promise. Besides, he's my beloved husband. There's no reason to be shy. Just do it." As a determined and wild look flashed across her eyes. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. And suddenly, Brad was overcome with an unfamiliar excitement. He was so inexperienced that he didn't realize that the whole game was turning him on, that it was supposed to turn him on. Haley then moved as far away as their handcuffed wrists would allow, while Brad sat bolt upright on the couch. Standing there, Haley remembered Amy's golden rule for ultimate seduction. She hadn't been able to follow it through previously, as Brad had given in. She hadn't believed she would have another opportunity, but it turned out that she may now have the chance after all. Their situation rendered it impossible to follow all the steps Amy had explained, so she quickly decided which steps she could execute using only one hand. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she opened them again and began to raise her loose, oversized t-shirt, exposing her flat, sexy stomach. Brad's gaze wavered just for a second. His temperature was rising, and he was feeling flustered. Then she slowly lifted her shirt higher. Brad's eyes took in her narrow waist, curves, and beautifully soft and delicate skin. Then she lifted her shirt all the way to her neck and revealed her pink bra, at which point Brad thought he was going to lose his mind, and he couldn't even blink. Episode 259, The Shower Scene. As Haley continued her striptease, both she and Brad were as red as tomatoes. She had removed her t-shirt, but because they were cuffed in, it was now hanging loosely on Brad's arm. Now, She started to remove her shorts, and as they slowly fell to the floor, Brad swallowed hard, mesmerized. Haley was biting her lip as she stepped out of her shorts, and Brad just sat on the couch, not moving a muscle, with his mouth slightly open, entranced. Remembering and following Amy's advice and tips, Haley then let down her hair. When she shook it out, her long, black silky hair cascaded over one shoulder, covering the left side of the front of her body. She stood still for a moment and looked directly at Brad, with her hair falling over one shoulder. She looked so breathtakingly beautiful, and Brad could only bite his lip. She then slowly turned around and unhooked her bra. Because their hands were cuffed, the bra didn't fall on the floor, but it dangled from her arm. Then she slowly turned around, covering her breasts with her hands. And as she turned, Brad almost lost all willpower. He gasped in awe and had to fight the desire to pull her toward him and kiss her all over. His passion for her had never been stronger. His thoughts filled with only her, and his eyes full of desire. God, my wife is so beautiful, was the only thought that was filling his head. Just as he was about to lose all rationality, Haley spoke. Brad, is this enough? She asked in a small voice. She stammered and was clearly embarrassed. Although she had prepared herself for this, now that it was actually happening, she realized it took plenty of courage to go the whole way, particularly on a first attempt. Although a fog of desire was clouding Brad's every thought, her voice did reach his ears. He looked into her eyes and immediately realized how embarrassed she felt, and he started to feel bad. He couldn't deny that he had not wanted her to stop. The whole performance had been more exciting and arousing than he had thought possible, but neither did he want her to feel uncomfortable. When he realized how difficult it was for her, he knew that he would never want to force her to do anything that she wasn't comfortable doing. Of that, he was absolutely certain. So he stood and quietly helped her with her bra, placing the straps over her shoulders and fastening it behind her back. Next, he slowly put her t-shirt and shorts back on while she just stood and allowed her husband to dress her. Thank you. I'm sorry, I know I promised to do it, but... She then uttered softly as her face was still burning bright red. Brad remained silent for a short while, and then he took her face between his hands and kissed her forehead gently. No, don't say sorry. You fulfilled your promise. That's enough for me, he said, and she buried herself into his embrace. Shall we sleep now? She asked, and Brad nodded. I'll just have a shower. Brad paused suddenly in the middle of his sentence. They were still cuffed. And as he looked at his wife, it seemed she immediately understood what he was thinking, and she was already blushing again. They had been wearing the same clothes since that morning, and had spent the day doing all sorts of chores and other activities inside and outside the house. And now they felt a bit sticky. Realizing they had no other option, they finally stepped into the bathroom. Haley cut off Brad's sweatshirt with scissors, and Brad did the same with her t-shirt. Brad was about to pull down his pants when Haley stopped him. Wait! Are you really going to shower with me completely naked? She asked in alarm, and Brad looked at her puzzled. What? You don't want to see me naked? He asked, and Haley covered her face with her hands. God, this shameless and confident Brad is too much. Bring back my innocent Brad, she thought to herself. Since their first night together, it seemed that Brad was no longer innocent at all. She grabbed hold of the handheld shower, turned it on, and pointed it at his face as she pouted. Shameless Brad, she uttered. Haley was still wearing her shorts and bra, while Brad was now half naked. Once she had sprayed him with water, his perfectly chiseled body was covered with drops of water, and Haley had to turn away. It was her turn to feel hot and bothered. Let's shower like this, she said, and she turned the shower on herself. She noticed that Brad hadn't moved, so she stopped. What? Don't tell me you want me to bathe you, she asked jokingly, and at that, Brad bent his head forward, as if asking her to wash his hair. Haley was speechless for a second, but in the end, she couldn't resist. Okay then, sit down, she ordered, and Brad immediately complied. He perched on the edge of the bathtub, and Haley wet his hair with the shower. Then she squeezed some shampoo under her hand and began to massage his head gently until his head was a mountain of fluffy, soft foam. As she looked at him, Haley chuckled at his sexy cuteness. She continued to play with his hair until Brad offered to wash her hair too. They ended up laughing together as they covered each other with shampoo and foam. But soon, the tiled bathroom floor became wet and soapy, and suddenly Haley slipped. Fortunately, Brad caught her in time before she crashed to the floor. Are you okay? He asked as he held her close, but Haley just looked up at him as their eyes met. They gazed at each other for a few moments. Brad realized that he was pressed right up against her, and that his desire for her was apparent. And Haley could feel this as they pressed against each other in their wet clothes. They both turned scarlet, but before they knew it, they were kissing each other hard and deep, still wet and covered in foam and still under the running shower. Brad, Haley said breathlessly when their lips parted, but Brad continued to kiss her. As the water continued to fall from the shower, the fire of their desire consumed them, and they were finally naked. Brad carried her and gently laid her down on the bed before kissing her again. Brad, can we turn off the light? I want to touch your face, she whispered. So he reached over, turned off the light, and removed his mask. Haley then kissed him and caressed his face as though trying to memorize and visualize every detail of the man in her arms. When I come back, you'll finally see my face. I promise, he said, and the joy Haley felt on hearing those words almost made her heart explode. I will wait, she murmured softly, and then Brad's mouth was upon hers once more as he kissed her even more deeply. Haley, if I'm not being gentle again, please hit me, he whispered in a hoarse voice, barely able to catch his breath, but she just moaned gently and they both slowly drifted once more into a heavenly place of desire and pleasure. Episode 260, Canceled Engagement. Back in Washington, D.C., after Amy had fallen asleep in the car, Tyler had moved her into a comfortable position and placed her head on his lap as the car sped along the highway. The head of Brad's group in New York was sitting in the front seat and quietly watching Tyler in the rearview mirror. He was a little taken aback by his actions and how he was treating this woman. He had known Tyler for almost 5 years now. They had trained together, and he knew how brutal and terrifying he could be. So he was surprised by the care with which he was treating this woman. He had never imagined Tyler would show such care to anyone other than Brad, and although Tyler's expression didn't change, his small gestures were enough for the man watching from the front seat to realize that this woman meant something to him. Actually, boss, while we were waiting inside the bar, your friend came in with someone. She seemed to be her friend, but I saw that she put something, a drug probably, in her glass. Thankfully, your friend seemed smart enough to notice something was wrong, so she pretended to drink it, but I don't think she drank it all. I believe that woman must have been planning something, said the man in the front seat. Tyler's brows knit into a frown, and he glanced down at Amy before he took out his cell phone. Tyler made a call and was heard asking someone to investigate why Amy was in Washington in the first place. After an hour, as she remained fast asleep on his lap, his cell phone rang. Boss, it's Miss Amy's engagement party tonight, the man on the other end of the phone said. Tyler's forehead immediately creased into a frown. What did you say? He asked, his voice suddenly cold. The man calling him gave him all the information he had. We found footage that some bodyguards had forced her onto a plane in Lascamar, and upon her arrival in Washington, they brought her to a hotel owned by the Peterson Corporation. Her father wants an alliance with the Petersons, so he wants his daughter to marry Peterson's youngest son, but Miss Amy escaped before the party could start. The man on the end of the line completed his long explanation, and Tyler's face darkened on hearing this development. Check out what happened with her grandfather and find out about the woman in the bar, he ordered before ending the call. This news had angered Tyler. He glared at the woman on his lap and wanted to wake her up to ask her what was going on. Unable to sit still and do nothing, he dialed his grandfather's number. Hello? And why is my ungrateful grandchild calling me at this time? Said the older man. Tyler immediately asked, Grandpa, what happened to my engagement with Miss Zimmerman? His voice was calm, but he was impatient, not to mention curious about what was happening. His grandfather sighed. My friend is still in the hospital. He is recovering. He told me that the engagement between you and his granddaughter was still a secret. We had both planned to announce it on her birthday, but because of the unfortunate event, the announcement didn't happen, he explained, sounding downhearted. I'm planning to celebrate your engagement when my friend has fully recovered. Anyway, why are you asking? He asked, and Tyler shifted his gaze toward the window. No reason. I'm simply curious, he said quietly. Oh, now this is rare. My unromantic grandchild? Are you finally impatient to marry her? Don't worry, I'll make sure it happens. I'm going to visit my friend today, and I'll talk to Amy's family. Grandpa, I'm hanging up. I'm in the middle of a mission, he replied, and with that, he ended the call. A short while later, Tyler received another call. Boss, the woman was her cousin. We found out that she drugged her drink before leaving her alone in the bar, he reported, and this just made Tyler even angrier. He ended the call and he cracked his neck. He couldn't believe that the people doing this to her were her very own family. He felt a burning rage in his heart and a sudden urge to beat someone. Damn it, this is making me so angry, he thought. Then the man in the front seat spoke again. Boss, are we taking her with us? He asked, and Tyler looked at Amy for a while before considering what to do for the best. No. Call your men to secure a hotel room, he ordered. A couple of hours later, Tyler was carrying Amy in his arms into a hotel room. Did they use a short-acting drug on her? Tyler wondered as he placed her down on the bed. Amy then blinked and was suddenly awake. She looked up at him, and before he had a chance to move, she reached up and pulled his cheeks hard. "Hey, stop treating my handsome face like it's made from elastic," he said, and it was then that Amy was finally sure that the man holding her was none other than Mr. Handsome. She believed it when she saw him, but she just wanted to be certain she wasn't hallucinating. "Oh, so it really is Mr. Handsome," she said casually, and Tyler's lips curved into a smile. "Now that's a great reaction, little Miss Inappropriate. You didn't even freak out waking up to find a man was holding you down on a bed," he said, and Amy just raised an eyebrow. "If it hadn't been you, I promise you, I would have screamed. But I guess you're not considered a man in my eyes, so I suppose my instinct didn't kick in. I don't feel I'm in any danger when I'm with you," she said as she shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. Tyler tried not to become infuriated. "You're really trying to annoy me again, aren't you? Even though I told you to grow up. I'm kind of angry right now, so don't provoke me," he warned. But Amy just pulled his face closer. "I see. So Mr. Handsome is angry. I wonder if you're lying. I can't see any trace of anger in your face, though. Oh, but wait. Now that I can see your face close up, I can tell you that you are quite beautiful," she said. "What? Beautiful? What are you trying to say?" he asked indignantly, unhappy with this description. "Did this woman actually call me beautiful? That's the same as telling me I'm feminine, isn't it? Is she blind? God, this woman drives me mad," he thought, infuriated. "What kind of question is that?" she asked. "Why, it's a compliment, of course. Don't you know how beautiful you are? Well, maybe this is also one of the reasons why I don't feel threatened by you. You're too handsome, far too beautiful in my eyes." But Tyler wasn't pleased with this response one little bit. "Are you saying my face isn't manly enough, so you don't see me as a man?" he asked. His voice was still calm, but the irritation was clear in his eyes. He didn't like these so-called compliments. "Well, now that you mention it, maybe. But I'm telling you, Mr. Handsome Beautiful, men can turn into beasts, ferocious beasts, and some might even turn into uncontrollable, mad dogs if they had a woman in this kind of situation. But you're different. I can't feel any desire coming from you, so I don't think I'm in any danger whatsoever. I wonder if it's even possible for me to seduce you. Are you actually asexual by any chance?" she continued in a carefree manner. But the last comment had tested Tyler's patience to the limit, and he could barely control his temper. "Asexual? Now that's a good question, Miss Inappropriate. Just when I thought you couldn't get any more inappropriate, here it is. Why don't we conduct an experiment and find out if your theory is true?" he said, and something somehow jolted her. She didn't expect this response, but she immediately retaliated. "Maybe that would work, but too bad, Mr. Handsome. I'm not fond of experiments. Why don't you experiment by yourself? I would gladly accept if you asked me to seduce you, however. I bet you're..." But Amy wasn't given a chance to finish what she was saying. Tyler gripped her tightly and said, "Don't say I didn't warn you, little Miss Inappropriate." Then he slammed his lips onto hers. Episode 261, Caught Off Guard. Tyler kissed Amy hard, thinking that she would protest. He was trying to teach her a lesson, that she shouldn't judge a book by its cover. He forced his tongue inside her mouth as he held her tight and pulled her closer to him, trying to warn her of danger. But to Tyler's surprise, rather than protest, Amy slipped her hands around his neck, pulled him close, and kissed him right back. Tyler was completely caught off guard. She kissed him deeply and with as much skill as he had, and so they ended up in a passionate embrace. Tyler could tell the difference between her kisses and those he had shared with other women. But it wasn't just about her being skilled. It was just that she seemed to hypnotize him, and he couldn't break away. To him, kissing her and holding her tight like this just felt right. He felt a kind of warmth he had never experienced before. "Damn it, Amy!" He could only curse silently as he struggled to stop before it was too late. He had never once had this problem before. It had never been hard to stop whenever he'd wanted to, no matter how far and deep the intimacy went. But with Amy, the challenge was on a whole new level. He was overwhelmed. However, he was well trained, and maybe due to how he was created, he still managed to stop eventually. He sometimes felt like a robot programmed to always follow instructions, no matter what. Breathing hard, he kept her pinned down as he moved his body away from her. Amy was also in a state of complete shock. She had read the danger signals coming from Tyler, so she had actually tried stopping him. But she hadn't expected the effect of his kiss to be so intense that it simply knocked her sideways. She was accustomed to being the one first to break the flow of a kissing encounter. She sometimes even kissed with her eyes wide open, but now With Tyler, she couldn't even push him away, and she didn't understand why. "You little, I thought you said you weren't interested in my experiment. Why the hell did you kiss me back?" Tyler said. They were both obviously flustered and flushed following their passionate kiss. She looked into his eyes to see they were full of a wild yet controlled emotion that finally confirmed just how different this man was from all the men she had met before. Amy had learned the meaning of every gesture a man could make, and she was confident in her ability to understand a man's thoughts, feelings, and desires. But she failed to comprehend this man. He was a mystery to her. The more she observed and examined him, the more she felt like he was someone from another planet. But what was worse was that she couldn't explain why she felt the way she did with him. "Hey you, are you even listening to me?" he asked as he flicked her forehead, and Amy immediately rose. "Ouch! Why are you flicking me so hard? Can't you be a bit gentler?" she snapped loudly as she rubbed her forehead. "That's what you get for being careless. Don't trust in your instincts so much, okay? Some angels are devils in disguise," Tyler said, but Amy just stared lazily at him. "I already learned that a long time ago. It's just that, well, don't blame me. What can I do? There's no way I could resist such a beautiful man voluntarily throwing himself at me. Okay?" she replied with a shrug. Tyler just closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Damn it, she's making it sound like I threw myself at her, and she's the one who lost control. This little Miss Inappropriate really knows how to drive me insane. Episode 262. Worry about yourself. "I have to go. I have some important matters to take care of. You'll stay here and wait for Grandpa's people to escort you back home tomorrow," Tyler instructed her, and he was about to open the door when Amy spoke. "Wait, what's that? Are you wounded?" she asked, and her eyes widened as her gaze shifted to his blood-stained shirt. Tyler didn't seem at all alarmed. It had slipped his mind that a bullet had grazed his left shoulder during the chase only hours before. He was about to make light of it and impress upon Amy to remain in the hotel room when she suddenly got up from the bed and rushed toward him. She looked at his shoulder and examined it. "You're wounded," she exclaimed, but Tyler just flicked her forehead again. "Will you stop worrying about others and worry about yourself for once? You tell me you want to be free, but look what happened this time. You allow people to drag you anywhere like you're some helpless little kid. If I hadn't bumped into you in that place by pure coincidence, what would have happened to you then?" he asked, and for some reason he couldn't quite fathom. He suddenly felt angry. Amy was shocked. She didn't realize he actually knew what had happened to her. This was also the first time she had seen Tyler angry, although his fury was quite alarming. She wasn't annoyed by it. In fact, hearing him chastise her in this manner somehow made her feel emotional, because it sounded like he cared. But she couldn't speak and explain how she was feeling. Instead, she just tugged his black jacket as she tried to get a better look at his shoulder. "Your wound looks bad. I think you need to go to the hospital," she said, but Tyler pulled her hand away. "There's no need. It's nothing," he said as he was about to turn and leave when she blocked the door. "Look, you saved me tonight, so the least you can do is let me treat your wound to repay you." "Don't worry, I'm good at first aid," she assured him, but Tyler just flicked her forehead once more. "I told you to stop minding others. Now move," he said coldly and stubbornly, and Amy snapped. "So what if I mind? What's wrong if I care? You helped me, so why wouldn't you let me help you when you're wounded like this? Why are you so stubborn? A beautiful man like you should just let me treat you. It's a sin to neglect such a beautiful body like that. Don't you understand?" she yelled at him, and Tyler was a little taken aback. "Why are you suddenly yelling at me? And do you really need to call me beautiful?" He almost couldn't believe a woman was speaking to him like this. "Why not? I'm just speaking the truth, so don't be stubborn. You might not care about your body, but I care," she yelled again. After a moment or two, once Amy had stopped shouting, Tyler began to smile. "Oh, what's this then? Are you confessing your love for my body or something?" he teased. "Yes, I am. I'm trying to confess my love for your body, but let's be clear, not for you. I can't bear to see your poor, beautiful body being treated so harshly. If you don't let me treat it, I'll jump on you and devour you until morning," she replied with such a serious expression that Tyler almost choked. What the hell does she mean? He wondered. "Have you gone mad? Do you know what you're saying?" he asked when suddenly someone knocked on the door. "Boss, I brought the first aid kit," the voice said through the door, and Amy leaned forward and opened the door. "Thank you. Please give it to me. I'll take care of your boss," she said as she grabbed the kit from his hand. The head of Brad's group in New York had been outside the room the whole time and had heard Amy's shouts. Brad sent him with Tyler for his safety. When he heard that Tyler was injured, he had ordered his men to bring the first aid kit. Although he had noticed his wounded shoulder when Tyler had entered the bar, he hadn't dared to presume to tell the boss what he should do. He had known that he would not be bothered with a small wound, but the head of the group had also known what Tyler had called a minor injury would be one for which any normal man would need treatment. He was glad Amy was going to take care of it. "Please take care of our boss, miss," he said before closing the door, and Tyler frowned at Amy. But before he could say anything more, Amy charged at him and pushed him toward the bed before making him sit. Tyler realized that resistance was futile, so he sat and removed his jacket. "Just do it quickly," he ordered. But when Amy saw the wound, her heart started to race because the injury wasn't insignificant at all, and there was still blood flowing from it. "Hey, you said it was just a scratch. How could you ignore this?" she asked, and her face began to go pale. When he saw her expression, he realized that she was nervous. For some reason, he was reminded of their mother's pale face every time one of them was hurt during their escape. Tyler had to remind himself that although this kind of injury was no consequence to him, it was something quite serious to others. "Don't be nervous. It's not like I'm going to die. I'll see a doctor when I get home, so you don't need to worry about my beautiful body," he said playfully. Amy just wanted to smack him. Why is he still teasing me and full of energy at a time like this? Can't he feel any pain? She thought. "Are you afraid? I can do it myself if you like. Give it to me," he continued, but Amy didn't hand over the kit. Instead, she began to treat his wound quietly and gently. Tyler watched her as she concentrated at the task at hand, and his brain began to wander. He started to wonder about Amy and what he knew about her. He knew about her background and that she was practically a dethroned princess, but she still enjoyed her life. He liked her attitude of living her life to the fullest and enjoying her freedom rather than wasting her life trying to please others. But knowing that she was also fighting her own kind of war against the very people who were supposed to love her made him angry. Reflexively, he raised his hand and pinched her nose. Amy looked at him with a frown, and Tyler just laughed. "Next time, don't ever let anyone drag you away against your will," he reprimanded, and Amy retorted in no time. "Next time, don't let anyone hurt your beautiful body like this. I feel bad that your poor body has to suffer like this," she said, and Tyler became incensed at the use of the word beautiful again. In an attempt to get even with her, he continued, "You love my body a little too much. Don't you feel bad about the man you said you liked?" he asked innocently. Amy paused while she thought before continuing to treat his wound, and then replied to his question. "Well, now that you mention it, I haven't seen Mr. Ordinary since I met you. Oh well, he's not my boyfriend, so there's no reason for me to feel bad. But yeah, I think his body is beautiful too, judging by what I've seen of his physique. It might even be better than yours." "How do you know that?" he asked. "Just a hunch. Anyway, you treat your body so badly, so it stands to reason that his must be better. That's why you should take better care of yourself, or you'll only regret it later," she warned. "Will you stop talking about bodies? How the hell does that brain of yours work?" he said. "What's wrong about talking about beautiful bodies?" she asked sweetly. "Enough. Forget it," he sighed. As Tyler and Amy continued their bickering, Amy finally finished treating and dressing his wound. "Make sure to see the doctor," she instructed. Tyler said nothing and got up from the bed. "I'm leaving now. Remember what I said? Also, about your engagement to the Peterson boy, don't worry about it. Grandpa will tell your parents about us," he assured her, and Amy's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" she asked. Tyler nodded. "Yes, rest assured, Miss Inappropriate. I will fulfill my promise to you, so be good," he replied, and then Amy suddenly hugged him. "Oh, what should I do? This beautiful man is seducing me," she cried, and Tyler almost wanted to flick her forehead again. "What? Who the hell is trying to seduce a woman like you? Ugh, never mind. Trying to reason with this woman is too taxing," he thought. Once Amy had let go, Tyler opened the door and stepped outside. She followed him, and he tried to usher her back in the room. "I'm going. Go back inside now," he said before he finally turned to walk away. He got about 10 steps when suddenly someone grabbed him from behind. He was about to turn and scold her when she whispered in his ear, "Bye-bye. Take care." And then, out of nowhere, she bit down gently on his earlobe for 3 seconds before she dashed back inside the room and closed the door. Looking around at the closed door while touching his earlobe, Tyler could only bite his lip hard as he put his hands on his hips. He smiled with disbelief as his ears turned a little red. The head of the group was waiting outside in the corridor. "Well, boss, your woman certainly is bold and spirited." Tyler nodded and began to walk away. "Yes, and she is definitely my woman," he said. Episode 263, I'll Wait for You. At 4 o'clock in the morning at Gray Mansion, Haley was awoken by a loud click. It was the sound of a handcuff being unlocked. She slowly opened her eyes, and standing above her was the figure of her husband, half naked, looking intently at her. She called out his name sleepily and was about to rise when Brad leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Stay here. I'm just going to get changed. I'll be back soon," he said as he uncuffed her hand. "Okay," she replied, and Brad turned and left the room. She looked at the closed door for a while before she finally got up out of bed. Her knees felt a little weak, so she walked slowly toward her closet and took her time getting dressed. She returned to the bed and lay back down again, staring at the ceiling with her arms spread wide like wings. She remained like that until Brad re-entered the room. He was already dressed and appeared ready to leave. As she looked at him, something tugged at her heart, but she rose, turned her head up to look at him, and smiled. "Are you going now?" she asked. Although she was smiling, her heart felt heavy inside. "Yes," he said quietly. She looked into his eyes, and he seemed to be feeling the same way. There was a sadness in his eyes, and she could feel it too. As she looked at him, she continued to smile and then hugged him close. And then she took his face in her hands. "Don't be so sad. I know you're leaving, but it's temporary, right?" she asked, trying to ease the anguish they both felt. Brad leaned forward and gently pressed his forehead against hers. "Haley, I might be gone for a while this time," he told her, his voice hoarse and full of sorrow. "Yes, I understand. I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. I promise," she replied as she caressed the back of his head. And then they just held each other, as if they never wanted to be parted ever again. But they both knew that they would have to wait until his war was over before they could finally be together like an ordinary couple. "You won't be able to contact me either. It's for your own safety," he explained. "I know," she said in a small voice. "I understand." Tyler had already discussed this with her, so it wasn't unexpected. She now fully understood what kind of battle they were up against and the extreme caution they needed to take. They needed to follow strict rules for the sake of everyone's security. "I'm going to end this once and for all. I promise. When I come back, we'll be together forever," he said as he gently caressed her cheeks with his thumbs. An overflowing determination overshadowed the sadness in his eyes, and his fighting spirit shone through. "I know. I'll be waiting for your return, and we'll be together forever," she repeated. Then they shared a long and passionate kiss, as if sealing their promises to each other. When their lips parted, they heard a soft knock on the door, and they both caught their breath. Brad took her hand, and they stepped out of the room together. "Everything is ready, boss," Ken said, and Brad's grip on her hand tightened. "Okay," he muttered as the couple slowly followed Ken downstairs. Over the past 4 months, they had been apart many times, but this was the first time they had felt like this. They didn't want to let go of each other's hand, never mind being parted for any length of time. They were both feeling a new and unfamiliar kind of heartache. They counted every step, every last second that they were together until they were outside the house. Then they faced each other, and when the man in black opened the car door, they collapsed into each other's arms once more. The sky was still dark, and the breeze was cold, but what they felt inside was burning wildly. "Haley, I love you," he whispered as he kissed her eyes. "I love you too, Brad. I love you so much. I love you so much," she replied, and they kissed once again, paying no heed to the guards around them, who all cast their eyes away from the embracing couple. "Wait for me," he repeated, and Haley nodded as she fought back the tears. "I'll wait for you. Promise me you'll come back safe," she said, and after another long, tight hug and another long, deep kiss, they finally released each other. Haley smiled brightly as she waved her hand. Before he climbed inside the car, Brad turned back to take one last look at his wife. When he saw her wave, then he too raised his hand to wave, and that small gesture was enough to make Haley chuckle. She had never seen him wave before, and it was cute and adorable, and it made her smile, despite the agony of the situation. She then raised her other hand and waved both hands at him, and Brad did the same. Finally, he got inside the car, the door closed, and within seconds, it was speeding away. Before she knew it, the car had disappeared from sight. Dancer. He knew what he was saying was the truth. "Tyler, we will fly to Kentroma tonight," Brad finally spoke, and everyone looked at him in surprise. The military general beside him was particularly shocked by his sudden decision. "But sir, we still need to secure the general began. "There's no need. Tonight, I will start a war," Brad interrupted. His voice was powerful and terrifying, and it seemed as though the sleeping dragon had finally lifted its massive wings to take to the skies and start burning the world. And with those few words, he had awakened the warrior spirit inside his men, and Tyler could only smile with excitement. Episode 265, A Child Genius. 7 months later, Haley was in Greenport Hospital. Her eyes were closed, but she was seeing unfamiliar images in her head. She thought she was having a nightmare. In her dream, she could see a child wearing chemical protective clothing, playing quietly with the chemicals inside a huge lab filled with people in white coats. "Sweetie, come on, let's go eat. Your dad is already waiting for us," a woman had said, and they had walked hand in hand toward a cafeteria. Haley had recognized the young girl. She had known she was born in that place. Her parents had both been renowned biochemists of Talaventia, and they had both been Nobel Prize winners. But the family had been kidnapped by terrorists who had discovered their intelligence and decided that they could use their talent and innovation to force them to develop a weapon. Their daughter, the little girl, had also been exceptionally talented in biochemistry. Maybe it had been because she had been born in a lab that she had been so interested in the subject, even though she had been so young. But there had been no mistaking the fact that she had been a born genius in science, and her intelligence had even intimidated both her parents. She had been able to formulate chemicals on her own, as she had treated science as a game back when she had been only 7 years old, and it had freaked her parents out. Since her parents had realized her potential, they had done their utmost to shield her talents from the outside world, especially the terrorists. She had been under strict instructions to act dumb and let no one become aware of her genius abilities. They had been afraid that the organization would find out about her and use her just like they had used them. The young girl had spent her life disguising her intellect, but she had secretly learned everything she had seen inside the lab. For a child like her, surrounded by adults and living in a place like that, she believed that her life had been normal. She hadn't even realized she was a child. She hadn't mixed with other children, and so had felt that the only difference between her and the adults around her had simply been that she had been smaller. "Hello, little Sarah. How's your day going?" a man had asked when they had sat down to eat in the cafeteria. "Hi, Dad. My day is the same as usual, but I'm learning," she had answered. Her answer hadn't been that of a child at all, but that of a grown-up. "That's great, then. Just don't forget what we always tell you, okay?" the man had said as he had patted her head, and the girl had just nodded. "Yes, don't worry, Dad. I always keep that in mind," she had replied. And the little family of 3 had started to eat. Their life had been unusual, and they had been hanging on. But then her father had started getting sick. She had known that, just like all the other scientists before him. He had finally reached his limit due to exposure to all the chemicals and radiation. Those scientists whose health had deteriorated beyond saving had been taken away and replaced. Nobody had known where they had taken them. All anyone had known was that once they were no longer of any use to the organization had gotten rid of them. The girl's mother had started getting increasingly anxious each day, until one day, the little girl genius had overheard a conversation between someone who looked like a commander and her parents. "The only reason we didn't get rid of your child was that you both promised us a successful and deadly weapon. But it's already been years, and you have given us nothing. Do you think we wouldn't discover that you're both purposely sabotaging your work so that it fails? Don't take us for fools. We can easily kill you both right here and now. Or we could just kill your daughter." "Please, don't do this. Please don't touch our child. Give us another year. We can deliver what you want. We promise." "Fine, but this is your last chance. If you still fail to provide results after 1 year, you 3 will all leave this place as corpses. But if you're successful, we will set you all free." When she had heard those words, a fire had been lit in the heart of the young genius. She had wanted to fight alongside them, believing what they had said, and that they would really set them free once they had succeeded. So she had started to conduct her own experiments in secret. She had pretended she was just playing while her parents had devoted themselves to their work, desperately trying to find ways to survive. She had always been left alone. The laboratory had been her only playground and chemicals her only friends. The young girl had wanted to fight, but she hadn't known how. Her secret research had slowly been following the path to success, but she had known that she was running out of time and had started to lose hope until one day, her father had been hospitalized, and her mother had begged the organization's leaders that he be treated. Her mother had said that the invention was close to success, so the organization had relented, even though they had known it had already been too late for her father. It had been a silent night, and the little girl had watched while her dad slept on the bed. Hopelessness and despair had been welling in her eyes, yet she'd been unable to cry. She had believed that their situation had been normal, and thought that everyone had been undergoing the same as they had. She had never known that their entire life had been hell, and she hadn't been aware that elsewhere, other people had been living just fine and far better lives than them.